US side also, that there was a recognition that with whatever measure they were taking against India, and I would not even say that this is a US measure. I would say it's a measure taken by President Trump, because all of this is emanating from the politics of Donald Trump and people around him who are essentially amplifying whatever he's saying. There are voices in the US criticizing the administration for what they're doing. The House Foreign Affairs Democrats have come out with a statement, many other senior leaders. But so this has been, but I think President Trump perhaps also felt that maybe the kind of pressure that he was generating on India, and a lot of people say that he goes in for maximum pressure in negotiations as a way of extracting, but India was holding firm, and it was perhaps having a negative impact. The optics of the Prime Minister going to the SCO summit in China and having a very, very sort of positive interaction both with the Russian president, the Chinese president, that played in a big way in the US and generated a lot of commentary. Questions were asked, is the US losing India, which is not in US interest? So I think because of that, my sense is that President Trump may have felt that they had gone too far in terms of the pressure, and perhaps there was a need to move away a bit from that, and that's why on Friday he commented publicly and in social media that the U.S. India relationship is a special relationship, and there are moments that the two countries have on occasion, but it will all work out all right. And the Prime Minister had responded very positively. And then this morning he has come out with another comment saying that he's happy to announce that trade negotiations have resumed, and he's confident that soon some outcome will be there. And the Prime Minister has responded. So I would say that I think from both sides, there is a recognition that the relationship is important to both, and a renewed effort is now being made to stabilize the relationship. The Prime Minister of India had visited the US in February, and if you see, he was the fourth foreign leader invited to the White House. Before that was the King of Jordan, Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister of Israel, Prime Minister of India. It was a signal from the Trump administration that they valued the India relationship. In the joint statement that was issued on the occasion, very substantive, very detailed joint statement, it was said that the two countries will now enter into discussions for a multi-sectoral bilateral free trade agreement. And I think India was the first country with which the US said that they will do that. From all that I see in the public domain, there were intense negotiations. From all reports, there were 5 rounds of face-to-face discussions, extended sometimes for a week or so, which included 2 rounds of ministerial discussions. There were more than 40 rounds of virtual discussions. So very detailed discussions. And again, from all reports, a detailed framework or draft of an agreement had been worked out by early July. In many ways, it was far more advanced than any of the negotiations US had done with others. Because if you look at the US-UK agreement that has been announced, it's a framework agreement, not a detail. If you look at what US has done with Japan, with Europe, Indonesia, Vietnam, those are just announcements. There are no documents out there. So this was far more advanced, far more detailed, far more documented. But I think what happened in between was that the other partners of the US essentially caved into the pressure. And US claimed that Vietnam and Indonesia have completely opened up their markets, and yet US imposed 20% tariffs. EU said that they will invest $600 billion in US, buy $750 billion of energy from the US, and yet US imposed 15% tariff. Japan said that they would invest $500 billion in the US, and yet US imposed 15% tariffs. So President Trump was able to project domestically that I'm able to get huge market opening, and I'm not giving in anything, and I'm imposing tariffs. Now, that has become controversial in the US partners. The Japanese Prime Minister just resigned. And one of the reasons given for the resignation was that many in Japan felt that it was a one-sided trade agreement, so it was not working. Today, you are seeing voices in Europe saying that, the kind of agreement that has been worked out doesn't work for European industry, and they're asking for changes. South Korea was very unhappy with the kind of agreement that was forced on them. And now you are seeing that as part of the discussions or earlier plans, South Korea had invested in a plant in Georgia in the US. And that has been raided by US authorities. So questions are being asked whether the kind of agreements or compromises different countries worked out is sustainable. Will US change its position? There's an agreement today, you want to demand. So given all that, and given the kind of unilateral gains he was making, as I see it from whatever is out in the public domain, the discussions or the draft with India was fairly advanced, but it was a balanced agreement with gains for both sides. It was not the kind of agreement where President Trump could say that Indians have completely opened up and I have made no compromises and more tariffs on India. And so it didn't fit into the pattern of what he was claiming. But of course, so now we've gone through a bit of churning. So I think there's already huge progress on what could be done. And if the US side wants to pick up from there, it should not be difficult for them, so long as they are prepared to look for a fair and balanced agreement that works for both and not an unilateral imposition.